Since October 19th, 1943, the sky over Germany was cold, wide, and endless. The roar of B-17 flying fortresses filled the air as they flew in tight formation, heading deep into enemy territory. Among them, a bomber named Lucky 7 carried a crew of 10 men, each one silently praying they'd make it back home. In the very rear of the plane, sitting alone in the cramped tail gunner position, was Sergeant Danny Keller. Danny wasn't a big man. He was skinny, quiet, and always thinking. Other gunners talked about girls back home or counted the days left in their missions. But Danny was different. He kept a small notebook with drawings and notes. His brain never rested. He had been frustrated with how little warning tail gunners had when enemy fighters approached from behind. German planes were fast, silent at a distance, and deadly. By the time Danny saw them in his twin .50 caliber machine gun sights, it was often too late. He'd miss more than he hit, and every miss meant death could be moments away. That's when he had an idea. Something simple, something odd. During a break in England a few weeks earlier, Danny had picked up a cheap shaving mirror from a shop near the base. It was small and square, nothing fancy, but while cleaning his gun turret one night, he realized that if he placed it just right, angled in a specific spot inside the tail section, he could see a much wider view of the sky behind him. It was like adding a second pair of eyes. At first, his crew laughed at him. "What are you going to do? Shave the enemy down?" One of the waist gunners joked. Even his captain rolled his eyes. But Danny didn't care. He adjusted and readjusted the mirror every chance he got. He drew marks on the metal walls for the best angles. After a few flights, he started spotting German fighters seconds earlier than before, sometimes enough to get the first shot off. It wasn't long before results started showing. On October 8th, during a brutal raid over Bremen, Danny downed 2 fighters by himself. His early warning gave him enough time to prepare, and his bullets tore through the sky like lightning. His captain finally took notice. "Maybe the mirror's not so crazy after all," he said with a smirk. Word spread. Other gunners on nearby planes asked to see what Danny had done. He shared his notes, showed them the angles, and even helped install similar mirrors in other B-17s. It was just a piece of glass, but it changed everything. The tail was no longer the blind spot it used to be. German fighters started flying more cautiously, realizing they weren't invisible anymore. Now, on October 19th, as Lucky 7 flew toward Schweinfurt, a heavily defended city known for its ball-bearing factories, Danny sat behind his guns, eyes locked on the mirror. The sky was clear, the clouds thin. He watched for glints of sunlight, tiny shadows, the smallest hint of a threat. Then he saw it. 2 Messerschmitt Bf-109s, barely dots at first, flying low and fast from the rear left. They thought they were sneaky. They weren't. Danny's heart pounded. He didn't wait. He swung his turret around and opened fire before they were even in standard range. The first fighter veered off, shocked. The second wasn't so lucky. Danny's bullets tore through its wing, sending it spiraling down. The rest of the crew cheered through the intercom. "Nice shot, Keller." But Danny wasn't smiling. He was scanning again, watching the mirror, always alert. This wasn't about praise, it was survival. And he knew the sky didn't forgive mistakes. That small mirror, taped to the tail like some makeshift trick, had changed the game. The enemy didn't see it coming. They never did. And the sky, once a death trap for tail gunners, had now become a trap of Danny's own making. The next 10 minutes felt like hours. Enemy fighters kept coming in waves. 2 from above, then 3 from below, then another solo fighter diving from directly behind. But this time, Lucky 7 wasn't flying blind. Danny, with one eye on the mirror and the other on his guns, was already adjusting before the enemy even fired a shot. The third attack came in fast. A Focke-Wulf 190 screaming toward the tail at full speed, cannon fire lighting up the sky. But Danny was faster. His turret whirred loudly as he tracked the blur in the mirror, locked onto the shape, and squeezed the triggers. Hot brass shells clattered to the floor around his feet. The 50 caliber guns kicked back hard. But Danny held steady. The German fighter exploded mid-air, a fireball that sent chunks flying past the tail like shrapnel. Danny ducked instinctively, though none of it hit. The crew cheered again, but this time it wasn't just joy, it was disbelief. Nobody had ever seen a tail gunner shoot with this kind of precision, this fast. Most crews were lucky to scare a fighter away. Danny was dropping them. Up front, Lieutenant McCain, the pilot, could hardly believe it. "What the hell is going on back there?" he shouted over the intercom, half laughing, half shocked. Danny's voice crackled back calmly. "Just watching the mirror, sir." In the middle of chaos, that little line hit hard. Just watching the mirror. It wasn't long before nearby B-17 crews started noticing something strange. Enemy fighters were starting to avoid Lucky 7. One fighter swooped in close, then pulled away the moment the turret moved. It was like they knew the tail had teeth now, sharp ones. Other gunners in the formation, using Danny's mirror trick, started getting better results too. They were no longer flying blind. Every extra second the mirror gave them meant the difference between life and death. But not everyone was happy. When they landed safely back in England that evening, a group of visiting officers from Bomber Command was waiting. The Schweinfurt raid had been deadly. Dozens of planes lost, countless lives gone. Yet Lucky 7 returned without a single scratch. That kind of thing didn't go unnoticed. "You've had 4 confirmed kills today, Sergeant Keller?" one of the officers asked, looking at his clipboard. Danny nodded, exhausted, still in his flight gear, his face smudged with oil and sweat. "Yes, sir. And you credit a mirror?" The man raised an eyebrow. "Yes, sir." There was a long pause. Another officer stepped forward, stern and unimpressed. "You know unauthorized modifications to aircraft are against protocol, right?" Danny straightened up, suddenly aware of where this was going. "Yes, sir. But nothing," the officer interrupted. "You tampered with government property." Danny's crew started to protest, but he held up a hand. He looked the officer in the eye, calm but firm. "Sir, with all due respect, that mirror saved our lives today." "It saved a lot of lives. You want to court-martial me for that? Go ahead." There was silence. Even the officers didn't have an answer to that. 2 days later, new orders came down from Bomber Command. All B-17 tail sections are to be fitted with mirrored periscopic devices for improved enemy visibility. No credit was given publicly. No medal. No name mentioned, but every tail gunner knew who started it. Back in the barracks that night, Danny sat on his bunk, turning the small mirror over in his hands. The glass was cracked now from the vibrations of flight and combat, but he didn't care. He slipped it into his footlocker like a trophy. Not because it was fancy, not because it was official, but because it proved that sometimes the smallest ideas change the biggest battles. The next day, they'd fly again. More danger, more losses. But this time, they had a fighting chance. Because the sky? It wasn't theirs yet. But thanks to a mirror and a quiet gunner who didn't follow the rules, it wasn't just the enemies anymore either. A cold wind rolled across the airfield the next morning. Engines roared as dozens of B-17s prepared for another deep run into the heart of enemy territory. The crews moved like ghosts, silent, tired, and already half buried in the weight of what was coming. Some had shaky hands, others clenched jawlines. Every man knew someone who hadn't made it back yesterday. In the middle of the lineup, Lucky 7 sat, gleaming under the pale morning sun. Its fuselage was riddled with old bullet holes, patched with metal plates, but still standing proud. On its tail, inside the gunner's dome, Danny Keller sat ready. His headset crackled to life. "All crews, final checks. Take off in 4 minutes." Danny reached into his side pouch, pulled out a new mirror, this one not from a barber shop in town, but from an official mechanic's box. Word had spread fast. Mirror-assisted tail guns weren't a joke anymore. They were now standard issue, but Danny didn't trust the factory ones. Too polished, too perfect, too official. Instead, he placed his old cracked mirror back into the tail. The one that saved his life. The one that had become part of him. He locked it into position, checked the angle, and leaned back. His hands rested lightly on the twin triggers. Below him, the earth was already starting to tremble from the engines. Then came the voice. "Hey, Keller," crackled a familiar voice over the intercom. It was Collins, the waist gunner, a man who'd never taken anything seriously. "Word is the Krauts are offering a bounty now." Danny raised an eyebrow. "A bounty?" "Yeah," Collins laughed. "German pilots are told to take out the mirror gunner. That'd be you. You're famous now, buddy." The rest of the crew chuckled nervously. Danny didn't. "Fame's just another way to get noticed," he replied. "And noticed gets you killed." They all went quiet. The tone shifted back to what it always was before takeoff. Dead serious. Moments later, the B-17s lifted off the runway in a thunder of smoke and steel. Engines groaned under the weight of full fuel tanks and bomb loads. Inside the formation, Lucky 7 held steady near the middle. Not the lead, not the tail end, Charlie, but right where enemy fighters loved to pick targets apart one by one. As they crossed into occupied France, the chatter picked up. Reports of German fighters forming up. Radio signals intercepted. The Luftwaffe was coming, and this time they were angry. 30 minutes later, they struck. It started with 3 high-speed passes from above. Bf-109s diving hard and fast, firing before pulling up. Danny watched them through the mirror before they even entered his direct line of sight. He didn't fire yet. Too far. Too erratic. But the 4th fighter wasn't here to make a pass. It was different. It was tracking Lucky 7. Staying low, moving smart, approaching from below and behind, right in the blind spot. Almost. Danny caught the shimmer in the mirror. He didn't blink, didn't think. The guns roared again. The fighter swerved left, then right, trying to juke. But Danny was already leading him, adjusting, calculating. His bullets struck the wing, then the engine. The plane burst into flames and spiraled downward. Another one down. But something felt off. Seconds later, another fighter came in from the opposite side. Then another. Then a 4th. This wasn't random. This wasn't normal. They were all focusing on Lucky 7, ignoring the others. Swarming him, they were hunting the mirror gunner. Multiple bogeys. "They're ignoring us!" shouted one of the gunners from a nearby bomber. Danny knew it too. This wasn't just about one mission anymore. He had become a target. His invention had flipped the balance, and now the enemy wanted revenge. Sweat poured down his neck. His finger cramped around the trigger. Bullets flew in every direction. One enemy fighter clipped the tail and vanished into a spin. Another tore past so close that Danny could see the pilot's goggles. He was running out of ammo, running out of time. And that's when it happened. The 5th fighter made it through. It came in low, firing straight into the tail. The glass of Danny's mirror shattered instantly. The impact shook the entire turret. Alarms blared. Smoke started filling the rear compartment. He was hit, but not down. Through the smoke and sparks, Danny reached for the manual controls. His ears rang. His chest hurt, but he still had his eyes. No mirror now, just raw instinct. The 6th fighter lined up behind him. Danny didn't wait. He spun the turret by feel, by memory. The bullets flew. And then silence. Smoke. Blood. Metal. A falling fighter. Danny slumped forward, still alive. Just barely. The mirror was gone. But the legend had just begun. Danny couldn't hear much except the distant thumping of his own heartbeat in his ears. His hands were numb, his vision swam. The cockpit smelled like smoke and burnt oil, the tail section rattling with every second of flight. Somewhere in the chaos, he realized the mirror was gone, blown to pieces. But the enemy was still out there. From the front of the plane, the pilot's voice broke through the static. "Keller? Status? We saw the tail get hit. Are you alive back there?" Danny coughed, wiped something warm from his face. Blood. He pressed the mic button with shaking fingers. "Still here," he said, voice rough. "Barely." The intercom fell quiet for a second. Then the co-pilot chimed in. "Jesus, Keller, you just took out 6 fighters. We saw the last one go down trailing smoke." Danny didn't reply. He was focused on keeping his consciousness from slipping. The turret had taken damage. One of the guns was jammed. Shell casings and broken glass littered the floor around him. But the skies weren't clear yet. A sudden jolt shook the plane again. They'd been hit, this time by flak. The plane bucked hard, and Danny was thrown sideways into the turret wall. He bit down to stop himself from screaming. Pain exploded through his ribs. He was fairly sure something was broken now. "Engine 2 is smoking," the pilot yelled. "We're losing altitude." Danny blinked back the black, creeping into the edges of his vision. Through the busted rear plexiglass, he could see the other bombers struggling. Some were on fire, others missing parts. One had peeled off entirely, nose down, disappearing into the clouds forever. He tried to reach the emergency handle to adjust the gun turret, but his arm wouldn't move the way it should. It was dislocated. Maybe worse. And then he saw it. A lone German fighter, trailing behind the formation. No squadron, no wingman, just one. But it wasn't attacking. It was watching. The plane flew at a steady distance, pacing Lucky 7 like a predator stalking a wounded animal. Danny narrowed his eyes, trying to see the markings. The paint was dark, sleek, different than the others. This wasn't a rookie pilot. No, this was someone else. Someone who knew who Danny Keller was. The fighter edged closer, just out of range of the tail guns. Danny tried to lift the good one, his right gun, aim it with one arm, but he couldn't get a clean line. Inside the enemy plane, he swore he saw the pilot raise a hand. Not a wave, not a salute, a challenge. Danny stared through the cracked glass. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. This was personal now. He was the symbol. The man who turned the skies against the Luftwaffe with nothing but a cheap mirror and stubborn guts. And the enemy wanted to make an example of him. The fighter broke, off and disappeared below the cloud line. Gone. But not for long. Danny radioed in. "Enemy fighter circling. He's coming back. Alone. Can you handle it?" the pilot asked. Danny gritted his teeth. "Not with these arms. But I'll try." Then the crew chief, Mason, up in the radio room, spoke softly. "We'll cover you. Just tell us where he comes from." Danny blinked. They'd never done that before. Coordination like that in a B-17 under fire was rare. Dangerous. But Mason didn't wait for permission. "You gave us a way to see the bastards before they saw us, Keller. Time to return the favor." Danny felt something heavy in his chest. Wasn't just the bruised ribs. It was the weight of the moment. The mirror might have shattered, but its reflection remained, etched into every man who flew beside him. The sky began to glow, sun breaking through high clouds, and just like clockwork, the dark fighter reappeared from the left, low and fast, looking to catch them bleeding. But Danny was ready. Left side, low, coming fast. Mason relayed it to the waist gunners. Collins and Davis rotated their 50s. Bullets ripped through the air as soon as the German fighter broke from the clouds. He tried to bank, but it was too late. They were waiting. One of the bullets clipped his wing. Another hit the tail. Then a spray of rounds caught him broadside, and the engine lit up in a burst of flame. Danny watched it fall, spinning toward the forest below. He didn't cheer. He just breathed. Slow, painful, steady. The crew was silent, even over the intercom. They'd done it. Not because of orders. Not because of luck. But because one quiet tail gunner had once taped a cracked mirror to a piece of cold steel and turned the sky into a battlefield where vision, not rank, ruled. Lucky 7 limped home that day, 2 engines failing, wings torn, a trail of smoke marking its path across the sea. And in the back, among the debris and blood, Danny Keller passed out with a small smile. Because even broken, the mirror had done its job. The world returned to Danny in waves. First, the hum of fluorescent lights, then the scent of antiseptic, and finally, the dull ache in every corner of his body. He opened his eyes to find himself in a hospital bed, bandaged and bruised, the faint beeping of a monitor keeping rhythm with his heartbeat. The ceiling was unfamiliar. So was the quiet. This wasn't the barracks. It wasn't even England. A nurse noticed him stirring. She smiled softly and leaned in. "You're in a field hospital just outside London," she said gently. "You've been out for 2 days." Danny tried to speak, but his throat was dry. She handed him water and waited. "My crew," he finally croaked. "All made it." "Banged up but alive," she replied. "You brought that bird home half dead. The pilot said it was you who saved them all." Danny's head sank back on the pillow. Relief washed over him, deeper than the painkillers running through his veins. But the peace didn't last, because the next face that walked into his room wasn't a friend. It was an officer in full uniform, sharp, polished, carrying a clipboard, and a gaze that felt like a knife through cloth. "Sergeant Keller," the man said, without introduction. "Glad to see you breathing." Danny gave a slight nod. "You're being transferred to High Command Intelligence in 2 days," the officer continued, flipping through papers. "They've requested a debriefing. Classified." Danny frowned. "Why?" The officer didn't smile. "Because you started something." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The mirror trick? It's not just saving lives anymore. It's changing how the enemy engages us. Their pilots are pulling back earlier, avoiding tail positions, wasting ammo firing from angles they don't normally use. That one idea, you've disrupted their patterns. They're not adapting fast enough." Danny was silent. "We want to replicate what you did," the officer continued. "But not just for tail gunners. We're talking full visibility systems, mirrors, lenses, custom optics for all defensive stations. Your field notes are being used to design retrofits across the fleet." "Good," Danny muttered, wincing as he sat up slightly. "Maybe fewer kids will die now." The officer didn't respond. Just scribbled something on his clipboard, then turned toward the door. But before leaving, he paused. "Oh, and that pilot," he said. "The German one who tailed your squad. Intelligence believes he's part of a specialized Luftwaffe unit, a hunter squadron. Their job isn't to shoot down bombers anymore. It's to hunt innovations," Danny blinked. "What? They're targeting anything, or anyone, who changes the rules of the game." The door closed behind him. That night, Danny lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his body wrapped in gauze, his mind wrapped in unease. He hadn't meant to start a war of ideas. He just wanted to stay alive. But now, he realized he wasn't just a soldier anymore. He'd become something else, an asset, a target, a name whispered on both sides of the front line. 2 weeks later, after a brief recovery, he found himself standing in a hangar at a secret airfield, staring at a new B-17 Iron Widow, gleaming with fresh paint and unfamiliar upgrades. The entire tail section had been redesigned with a reinforced turret, enhanced visibility, and a state-of-the-art multi-mirror system inspired by his original setup. A tech officer approached him. "She's yours, Sergeant. Command wants you flying again." testing the new configuration in live combat. Danny looked at the glass. It was cleaner, stronger, more sophisticated, but it didn't feel like his. "Where's the old one?" he asked. The tech looked confused. "The old what?" "The mirror," Danny said. "The cracked one." The officer gave a half smile. "That thing? We tossed it. Didn't meet standards." Danny said nothing, but inside, something twisted. The war had taken his crew, his strength, his peace, and now it had taken the soul of his idea, too. Still, orders were orders. A week later, Iron Widow lifted into the sky, sleeker and faster than Lucky 7, loaded with experimental defenses and hand-picked gunners trained in Keller's tactics. But Danny knew something else. Somewhere out there, the enemy was watching again. Not for the plane, for him. Because in this new kind of war, where mirrors could kill and ideas could bleed, it wasn't just bullets that drew blood. It was the mind behind the trigger. The sky felt different from the Iron Widow. Higher, cleaner, too quiet. Danny Keller sat in the new tail turret, hands resting on upgraded control grips, the new multi-mirror system wrapped around him like a high-tech cocoon. Sleek, efficient, brilliant, but soulless. Every time he looked into those pristine, polished mirrors, he didn't see his enemy anymore. He saw himself, a reflection so sharp it made him feel exposed. He missed the crack, missed the imperfection that had once saved his life. "Radio check, all gunners," came the pilot's voice. Danny responded out of habit, calm and clipped. "Tail gunner, clear." The mission was simple on paper. Recon over the edge of Belgium. No bombs, no heavy escort, just 4 B-17s running high-speed tests to see how the new visibility systems held up. A low-risk mission, Command had said. Danny didn't believe in low risk, not anymore. 40 minutes into the flight, his gut told him something was wrong. The mirror on his far left caught a flicker, too quick to be a sun glare, too slow to be a bird. Then he saw it. Dark wings cutting across the clouds. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. There were 2. No, 3. Climbing up from below, low and wide to avoid radar. Smart. Then something cold settled in his spine. The lead fighter wasn't just familiar. It was personal. It was the same black-painted Bf-109 from the Schweinfurt run, the one that had studied him, the one that had pulled away at the last moment after a silent salute. It hadn't been shot down like the others. It had vanished, and now it was back. Danny grabbed the mic. 3 bogies, fast movers, rear left. One of them is the same bastard from Schweinfurt. You sure? The co-pilot asked. Yeah, Danny said, his voice like stone. I'd know him anywhere. The formation adjusted, but not fast enough. The German fighters didn't just charge, they flanked. One zipped right under Iron Widow, too close for belly guns to hit. Another climbed above, just out of sight, waiting. But the black one, it flew straight for Danny. Not firing, not diving, just pacing. It was watching again. Danny adjusted his turret, gun barrels locking on. But still, the German didn't fire. Not yet. Then it came. An eerie flicker of sunlight that bounced off the German canopy. It wasn't just any reflection. It was from a mirror. Danny froze. They'd copied him. The realization hit like a punch to the chest. The Luftwaffe had mirrored his design, literally. The German pilot had a rear-facing mirror mounted inside the cockpit, catching angles a fighter shouldn't have. It wasn't just a hunter now, it was a hunter with vision. Jesus. Danny whispered. "They're using it too. They've adapted." "Repeat that, Keller," the pilot asked. "They've got mirrors, just like us." Before anyone could respond, the black fighter dove hard. Not toward the bombers, but beneath them. Moments later, tracers ripped through the underbelly of the B-17 flying ahead. One of the new gunners hesitated, unsure where to shoot. The upgraded mirrors, all crystal clear, weren't cracked, and in their perfection they caused glare, disorientation. Too many angles. Too clean. That bomber dropped in seconds. A fireball swallowed it. Danny didn't wait. He rotated fast, lining up on the black fighter as it came out of its loop. This time, it fired. Glass exploded behind Danny's head as bullets tore through the turret casing. A round clipped his headset, and another grazed his arm. Pain lit up his nerves, but he held the trigger. His rounds screamed through the sky. He hit the edge of the fighter's wing. It shook, dipped, but recovered. The German wasn't just skilled, he was surgical. And now he had a mirror, too. Danny slammed his fist on the turret wall. "You want to play my game? Fine. Let's see if you're better at it." He adjusted the old angle, an instinctive move, twisting one of the mirrors out of factory alignment, closer to the cracked angle he once used. His body remembered it, even if the plane didn't. And there it was. The blind spot. The German made one fatal mistake. He passed through it. Danny didn't hesitate. He fired a burst that tore through the canopy. Glass, blood, smoke. The black fighter twisted midair and dropped from the sky, tail ablaze, spinning in wide, lazy circles. The formation held its breath. Danny watched it fall. No shoot, no signal, just silence. Then the gunner from the B-17 ahead spoke. "Did you see that?" He nailed him. "One shot," someone else chimed in. "Was that Keller?" "No way. That guy's already a ghost story." Danny leaned back, bleeding, exhausted, but alive. He stared at the cracked mirror he'd readjusted, a hairline fracture running across its surface now. He smiled. Perfect was never the answer. Sometimes the crack is what lets you see the truth. And the truth was this. They could copy his weapon. They could study his tactics. But they could never duplicate the man behind the mirror. Smoke trailed from Iron Widow's left engine as the formation limped home, battered but breathing. The sun was dipping low, bleeding orange light across the horizon, and the whole sky looked like it had been set on fire. Danny's arm throbbed, every heartbeat pulsing through the open wound. But he refused to leave his turret. His crew begged him to rest. He didn't even answer. He just stared at the cracked mirror. That fighter, the one with his idea, had shaken him more than any bullet ever could. It was proof the enemy wasn't just watching him. They were learning from him. His mirror had once turned the skies into a trap, but now that same trap could catch anyone, friend or foe. The world didn't feel so simple anymore. Back at the base, mechanics swarmed the plane the second it landed. Officers were waiting again. Same pressed uniforms, same unreadable faces. Danny climbed out slowly, blood soaking through his sleeve. Every step sent lightning through his ribs. "Sergeant Keller," one of them said as he approached. "Command wants to debrief immediately." Danny gave a faint, tired smirk. "You can wait 5 minutes. I need a cigarette." He lit one, hands shaking, and leaned against the landing gear while the hangar buzzed around him. Other crews walked by, nodding, whispering. He could feel their eyes. The legend of the mirror gunner had already spread like wildfire. Some called him a hero. Others called him cursed. When he finally walked into the command tent, 2 men were already waiting. One American, one British. The British officer spoke first, voice clipped and polite. "We've reviewed your gun camera footage. Extraordinary marksmanship, Sergeant." Danny said nothing. The American leaned forward. "We also saw what the German had mounted in his cockpit. Your assessment was correct. They've copied your system." Danny's jaw tightened. "Then we're even." "Not quite," the officer said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were black and white photos, wreckage of the downed German plane. Among the twisted metal and burned fuselage, one item had survived almost perfectly intact. A rectangular mirror with strange markings etched along its edge. Numbers, angles, and one word scrawled faintly in chalk. "Keller." Danny's breath caught. "They knew your name," the officer said. "Our intelligence team believes that Pilot was specifically assigned to hunt you." Danny stared at the photograph, the burned wing, the mirror. "He had my notes," he muttered. "Those markings are from my first field drawings. How the hell did they get them?" "That's the question," the British officer replied. "We suspect there's a leak. Someone's feeding your designs to the other side." The tent went quiet. Outside, rain started to patter against the canvas. Danny's fingers tightened around the folder until the paper creased. "You're telling me somebody here, one of ours, helped them copy my work?" "That's exactly what we're telling you." He looked up, eyes hard. "Then find them." The next week was chaos. Command tore through files, interrogated officers, grounded crews. Whispers spread through the base like wildfire. Nobody knew who to trust anymore. Danny spent most of his time sitting alone near the flight line, the cracked mirror resting in his lap. He'd refused to let the mechanics replace it. Every new reflection they offered looked too clean, too safe. The crack, he decided, was honest. It showed the truth, even when others didn't want to see it. One night, well past midnight, he heard footsteps behind him. Couldn't sleep either? It was Collins, his old waist gunner, carrying 2 mugs of steaming coffee. Danny didn't turn. "Sleep's for people who stop seeing ghosts." Collins handed him a cup anyway. "You really think there's a traitor?" Danny nodded slowly. "Yeah, and whoever it is, they're close." "Too close," Collins sighed. "You know what they're saying. That command wants to ground you. They think you're bad luck now. Too many close calls. Too much attention." Danny gave a bitter laugh. Bad luck doesn't shoot down enemy fighters, but maybe it scares cowards. They drank in silence for a moment, watching the fog roll over the runway. Then Collins said something that made Danny's heart freeze. "You know, that black fighter? The one that had your mirror? The mechanic who serviced Iron Widow the night before, he was seen talking to some British tech officers near the supply shed. Same ones who brought in those new parts." Danny's eyes snapped to him. "You sure?" Collins nodded. "He's gone now. Vanished after the mission." Danny's mind started racing. The puzzle pieces clicked together, one after another. The stolen notes, the replicated mirrors, the timing. "Jesus," he whispered. "They didn't just copy me. They fed them my data before the test flight." He stood up, tossing the coffee aside, adrenaline replacing exhaustion. "Where are you going?" Collins asked. Danny turned, his face pale but fierce. "If someone in this base is selling our secrets, I'm gonna find out who." He started walking toward the hangars, the storm wind ripping across the field, the rain hammering down. Behind him, lightning flashed across the horizon like gunfire, illuminating his reflection in the broken mirror for just a moment. It was cracked, distorted, but unmistakably human. And beneath that reflection, deep in the shadows of the base, someone was watching him back. The rain came down in sheets as Danny stormed across the tarmac, each step splashing cold water into his boots. His flight jacket clung to his back, soaked through, but he didn't feel it. He wasn't thinking about the pain in his ribs or the dull ache in his wounded arm. All he could think about was betrayal. Someone on this base had handed his designs, the very thing that was keeping bombers alive, to the enemy. And they were still here, watching, listening, waiting. He made his way to the hangars, where the mechanics worked through the night on crippled planes. The giant metal doors loomed ahead, one of them slightly ajar. The hum of voices and the hiss of acetylene torches echoed from inside. Danny pushed the door open and stepped into the light. Several men glanced up at him. Tired eyes, oil-streaked hands. Most looked away quickly, but one didn't. Corporal Renner, a transfer from another unit. Quiet. Polite. Too polite. Danny had only spoken to him a few times, but there was something off. The guy always asked the wrong kind of questions. How Keller adjusted his turret. What angles worked best? What kind of mirror material held up under vibration? Technical curiosity, he'd said. Just admiration. Danny didn't believe in admirers anymore. He walked straight up to Renner, who froze with a wrench in his hand. "We need to talk," Danny said, his voice low but sharp. Renner blinked. "Now?" "Now." They stepped outside into the rain. Danny led him behind the hangar, where the wind drowned out any chance of being overheard. The shadows were thick, the storm louder here. Thunder cracked above them. "I've been thinking," Danny began, "about that test flight, about how the Germans had exactly the same angles I wrote in my old notebook." Renner's jaw tensed. "And I've been thinking about how you were the one assigned to service Iron Widow the night before. First time touching that bird." "I was ordered to help with the mirror calibration," Renner said quickly. "Ask Lieutenant Parks." "Oh, I did," Danny replied, stepping closer. "He said you volunteered. Said you seemed too eager. Said he got a weird feeling afterward." Renner didn't move, but his eyes shifted, barely, toward the path leading behind the fuel trucks. "A way out," Danny's tone darkened. "You were feeding them, weren't you? Sending details to the enemy. You're the reason that pilot had my designs." Silence. Then Renner smiled, tight and bitter. "You think you're the only one who wants this war to end?" he said, voice low. "You think you're saving lives? You're just dragging it out. Every time you shoot one of them down, they send two more. You made it worse." Danny's stomach turned. "You're a traitor." "I'm a realist," Renner snapped. "They wanted your mirror. I gave them the math. That's it. They don't need to know where it came from." Danny clenched his fists. "They knew my name." Renner didn't answer. That was enough. Danny lunged, driving his fist into Renner's gut. The man staggered back, slipping on the wet gravel. He tried to reach for something in his coat, a small pistol. But Danny kicked it away, sending it skidding under a Jeep tire. He grabbed Renner by the collar and slammed him against the hangar wall. "You think this war ends because you hand over blueprints?" Danny growled. "You think you're saving lives? You just got good men killed. You turned the sky into a goddamn chessboard, and you sold the pieces." Renner coughed, laughing weakly. "You're a fool, Keller. You still think you're a hero in a storybook. You think mirrors and bullets can win this?" Danny pulled back, ready to punch again, but stopped. He looked Renner in the eye. "No," he said. "I know bullets don't win this war, but I'll be damned if cowards like you are the ones writing how it ends." He stepped back and raised his voice. "Guard!" Within seconds, two MPs rounded the corner, pistols drawn. Danny pointed to Renner. "Traitor. Tried to sell Allied intel to the Luftwaffe. Has a weapon under the Jeep." Renner didn't resist. He just smiled coldly as they cuffed him. "I'm not the only one," he said, as they dragged him away. "You'll see." Danny stood there in the storm, heart pounding. The wind whipped against him. Lightning lit the hangar roof. That last sentence echoed in his head like a warning bell. He wasn't the only one. There were more. The enemy wasn't just in the sky anymore. It was already here, on their side of the mirror.